Hi, welcome to Second Earth Alternative. They are back. I'm talking about Oumuamua, the spacecraft, well, some will say spacecraft comets that visited Earth or I should say slingshotted around our solar system. And now we have a Harvard professor who says alien technology actually visited Earth in 2017. So I'm just going to read this article. It's very short, but I wanted to basically kind of go over the information that this channel had talked about before regarding Oumuamua. I want to give you a few tidbit facts here and there. I also wanted to review Tim Pool. He's a political commentator who started talking about Oumuamua. And I just kind of wanted to fill in some of his discussions that he had because I actually respect Tim Pool a lot. I think he's a great political commentator. But sometimes when he gets into the subject of ufology, he kind of just, I don't know, kind of misses the boat a little bit here and there and kind of doesn't always have all the information. But having said that, let's go ahead and start with this article. A Harvard professor believes that we were visited by alien object in 2017. In his upcoming book, Extraterrestrial, the First Sign of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth, theoretical physicist Avi Loeb lays out his theory about a peculiar shaped object that entered our solar system several years ago. The interstellar object named Oumuamua was first observed through the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii's Haleakala Observatory in 2017. Researchers determined that it had passed through the ecliptic plane on September 6 from the direction of Vega. This is really interesting. We'll talk about that later, but a star in the Lyra constellation that is about 25 light years away from our planet. Just 3 days later, Oumuamua, Hawaiian for scout, began accelerating towards the sun before it eventually came closer to Earth on October 7, moving swiftly towards the constellation Pegasus and the blackness beyond, according to Loeb. Some scientists claim Oumuamua, which is believed to be the first interstellar object detected in our solar system, was simply another comet. However, Loeb, the chairman of Harvard University's astronomy department, dismissed the assumption as it relies too much on the familiar. I couldn't agree more. What would happen if a caveman saw a cell phone? He might think it's a rock. He wondered while talking to the New York Post. He's seen rocks all his life, and I actually didn't know he was going to say this. He's seen rocks all his life, and he would have thought it was just a shiny rock. Loeb says there are two big details that suggest Oumuamua wasn't just a comet, but rather a piece of alien technology. The first detail is the object's dimensions, as it was determined to be 5 to 10 times longer than it was wide. Loeb argues the cigar-like shaped object isn't typical for a natural space object. Not typical. I don't think it's ever even come close to that type of shape. Generally, when you have a shape that's that elongated, I think they estimated the ratio to be somewhere between 1 to 8 in terms of its length and the width. An object that starts spinning like that, just due to like the torque forces, would naturally break apart. So the fact that this object is not breaking apart is not only unique, but it also kind of infers to the density of the object. Perhaps it's completely out of metal, is one idea. Loeb explains that the sun's gravitational force would cause a natural object to move faster as it approaches and eventually push the object back, causing it to move slower as it moves away. Loeb points out that this didn't occur with Oumuamua, which accelerated slightly but to a highly statistically significant extent as it moved further and further away. If we're not alone, are we the smartest kid on the block? Loeb asked. If there was a species that eliminated itself through war or changing the climate, we can get our act together and behave better. Instead, we're wasting a lot of resources on Earth fighting each other and other negative things that are a big waste. And that last comment, what better timing than a day before January 6th, when supposedly there's going to be some crazy rally that has almost like Civil War type implications. But moving on from the article, I wanted to kind of reference some of the information that we know or have talked about this particular topic in reference to what Tim Pool is saying about it. So let's get started, and I'll just go ahead and play what Temple says real quick.
This crazy story, and it's so, and then we'll go to Super Chats after this. But check out the story. This is crazy. I really want to talk about this. Harvard professor says alien technology visited our solar system in 2017. He also says they're coming back.
Now, Temple says that the Harvard professor says it's coming back. I don't see anything regarding that. In fact, there's an idea that it might be elliptical and it might come back like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years later, is what I've heard. But if you read over here, it says, as the challenge is formidable, Oumuamua has a hyperbolic excess velocity of 26 kilometers per second, which that translates to velocity of 5.5 nautical units a year. It will be beyond Saturn's orbit within 2 years. This is much faster than any object humanity has ever launched into space. Compare this to Voyager 1, the fastest object humanity has ever built, which has a hyperbolic axis velocity of 16 kilometers per second. So part of what made this comet so unique, or asteroid, however you want to interpret, or spaceship, it's the idea that this thing was going at, was one of the fastest interstellar objects to ever cross our solar system. But even being that fast, it's not even twice the speed of our own object. So when you think about how long it's taken Voyager 1 to just get past our solar system, you see why I'm saying that it might take thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years, for this thing to come back around.
The interstellar object named Oumuamua.
Sorry, it's not Oumuamua, it's Oumuamua, but we can excuse that one. Let's just keep playing.
Researchers observed that it had passed through the ecliptic plane on September 6th from the direction of Vega, a star in the Lyra constellation that is about 25 light years away from our planet.
So Tempo doesn't really pause here, but this is actually a really important point. This is what I was mentioning earlier in the article. It came from the star system Vega. This is so unbelievably interesting because if you've ever seen that amazing movie Contact by Carl Sagan, I don't know what Carl Sagan knew or if it was just a random coincidence, but well, here, I'll just play you the scene real quick.
Hello. I need a full systems check.
Coordinates confirmed. Whatever it is, it ain't local.
Position?
I checked interferometry somewhere in Lyra, I think.
Vega?
Can't be. It's only 26 light years away.
So out of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of stars that we know of, it just happens that the first interstellar object that could be alien to ever cross our solar system just happens to come from the same star system that is the first signal of life from the movie Contact. And it was a book at first, but I mean, isn't that strange? I don't know. I thought that was pretty remarkable, but let's keep going.
Loeb says that there are two big details that suggest Oumuamua wasn't just a comet, but a piece of alien technology. The first detail is the object's dimensions, as it was determined to be 5 to 10 times longer than it was wide. Loeb argues the cigar-like shape isn't typical for a natural space object, but the theoretical physicist lays the biggest detail that supports his theory is the movement, the excess push away from the sun. That was the thing that broke the camel's back.
Okay, so what Temple is referring to there exactly is that when this object left the solar system, or I should say slingshotted around the sun, generally, according to the laws of physics, it would be assumed that the sun's gravity would actually accelerate at first, but upon leaving the sun, it was, at least based on its trajectory, it was supposed to slow down, basically, because the sun was still pulling back on it. But as it was leaving the sun's orbit, it actually started accelerating, which makes no sense whatsoever when you think about how physics applies and how gravity would be pulling this object back as it's trying to leave the sun's range, essentially. And here it says on this Wikipedia page, initial speculation as to the cause of the acceleration pointed to off-gassing. So there was some theories that perhaps it was gases that were released. The problem with this theory, as it says here, is that no such tail of gases were ever observed following the object. Research estimated that enough outgassing may have increased the object's speed without the gases being detectable. Now, the problem with that is that a critical reassessment of the comet hypothesis found that instead of the observed stability of Oumuamua's spin, outgoing gases would have caused its spin to rapidly change due to its elongated shape, resulting in the object tearing apart. And that's not what we saw. The object not only stayed stable, it didn't have this erratic spin. And when you have an object that is that elongated, the center of mass is going to be very off balance. Think about how like a skateboard, right? Temple might know about this example. A skateboard, when you do a trick on a skateboard, you generally flip it on its side, right? You don't ever try to flip it this way because upon flipping it head first, there is a physical property that makes the skateboard extremely unstable. So it's very hard to create like a front flip of a skateboard, essentially. Everything has to kind of have this kind of winded end. And I think this is what the part of the properties that they're kind of inferring due to what the outgassing would do to the object in creating this instability. Anyways, let's keep playing.
He said also, they're coming back.
Once again, he claims that they're coming back, and that's just not what we're seeing. I haven't read anything about that regarding, or at least not anytime soon. If you know anything that I don't know, please comment below.
Not the first story we got this year about aliens being real and coming to Earth, and now the head of Harvard's astronomy department has said, yeah, aliens are real. So we talked about revelations a little bit.
Okay, so the reason why I played this segment is because Temple is almost like selling this idea of aliens, like, oh yeah, aliens are real. And the fact is, before he used to call them, like people who believed in UFOs and aliens, like Skittles and Rainbow. That's how he equated believers, so to speak. And also, he just mentioned Revelation. And there's something else that we want to talk about, Revelation, that he may not have picked up on, but let's see what he says real quick.
This is interesting. Josh Bushnell says, how far apart are we to be to buy or sell? 6 feet apart. Like this, 6-6-6. Revelation 13:18. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
So let the one with the knowledge calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of the man. Now, Temple kind of glosses over this, but there is something actually really important about this, really interesting. And I showed this before in previous episodes, but if you've never caught this, it's quite remarkable. And so I'm just going to go ahead and show it again because, okay, so it looks like we lost the feed for our main camera. So we're going to be using this perspective from now on. And okay, I guess I'm going to preface this by talking about the golden ratio. It's something that we just discussed lately when we're talking about the Great Pyramid of Giza and all these amazing connections with global alignment and how the pyramid itself, through its geometry, seems to denote the golden ratio or the square root of the golden ratio in all kinds of interesting ways. The thing about the golden ratio is that in a way it's considered to be like the number of life. So here's a picture that I created a long time ago, and I want to show you what I mean by life. Look at this. These are all different things, like from the galaxy to the baby fetuses that, eventually you can see the shape of the baby itself that grows almost into the form of the golden ratio. And of course, you got the Vitruvian Man, which was Leonardo da Vinci's art piece that was completely based on the golden ratio. So that's why I kind of say that the golden ratio is like the number of life. So let's see what happens here with this 666. I'm going to take a simple mathematical function. Okay, so if you just go to Google, and we'll just do the calculation through Google because it's pretty easy. So if you just take this sine, which is like, when you have a triangle and you can kind of calculate the wave function, it's the top of the wave and then the cosine, which comes from the bottom of the wave. Well, check this out. Sine of 666 degrees plus the cosine. And, we're just here calculating the number, just like the Revelations talks about. 6 times 6 degrees equals the negative 1.618. Look at this. The golden ratio, ladies and gentlemen, It's literally the exact golden ratio, except the negative version of it. So it's almost like saying that with the number of 666, and applying a very simple sine plus cosine function, you can actually get the negation of the number of life. And that is the number of man. That is the number of the devil, so to speak. And then it's something that I was actually kind of shocked because when I first heard about this, nobody told me about this. I just kind of decided to try this for fun. But what would happen if you actually flip these? So instead of cosine, so put cosine over here and sine over here. Well, check this out. It equals nothing. 0. That's crazy. Anyways, so I think, I don't know what Revelation is meant by calculate 666, but this is one calculation that is pretty stunning, to say the least. Anyways, let's keep going here.
Somehow, in the COVID omnibus, the spending bill, was the Intelligence Authorization Act, which included, from the time of passing the bill, 180 days, the Pentagon must release all their information on UFOs.
So, he's talking about the Pentagon releasing the information on UFOs, but he didn't really go into detail why this might be part of the Omni package that's happening. I mean, I don't know exactly why they would put that in the recent stimulus bill, but we do know that the Pentagon has been dealing with this UFO topic for quite some time. We made one of our highest viewed videos was on Luis Elizondo, the gentleman who claimed to have worked at the Pentagon, but also our second episode was on Christopher Mellon. And at the time, I don't think anybody had made an episode on Christopher Mellon. Nobody really knew who he was. But I made an episode on him because I thought it was really relevant as somebody who was one of the few people who had actually overseen the work of NSA, NRO, basically all the intelligence agencies. This individual was talking about the possibility of UFOs. And Huffington Post had made an article about it, but nobody really was talking about it. And this guy ended up being one of the 4 members with Luis Elizondo to the Stars Academy that eventually gave that Tic Tac UFO footage to the New York Times and all the other publications that started saying, hey, UFOs might be real. So Tempo had a few guests. This is Drew Hernandez, and let's see what he has to say about this.
Sure. I think if you take a look at World War II with Roswell, coming out of that, how NASA came out, there definitely was like this technological boom and advancement because the Nazis were obviously involved with like black magic, and Adolf Hitler was obsessed with that, like obtaining even the scientists, like crazy Nazi scientists that were obsessed with, communicating with off-world entities or whatever they called them. Some people believe they're demons.
Now, I think it's really interesting that he says off-world entities and that some people call it demons. Because according to the Revelation, and this is something we talked about in the previous episode, the Revelation does a piss poor job differentiating dragons from demons. In fact, it even says that the beast of Revelations had horns like a lamb, and it had the face of a lion. And you think about the lion-faced dragons from China, and you think about how horns is used so often, whether you see goat with ancient depictions of Ishtar, or you see it often used with like the Dogon culture. It's just, or the chimera from Greek culture, the fire-breathing chimera that has a goat, a lion sticking out, and a serpent. So these are our symbols that have been traditionally used to represent the dragon. And if you just in our previous episode with the pyramid, when I showed you all those monuments that happen in a line, almost all of those cultures had some kind of like dragon entity. You think about the Mayans and how they literally have Quetzalcoatl coming out of that pyramid, or I guess for Aztecs, it would be called Kukulkan. Still, it's this serpentine-like creature. And it's interesting because the dragons don't always have wings. They always have the ability to fly. They're always considered highly intelligent creatures. They're always associated with gold. That kind of goes back to the idea of Zachariah Stitchin and saying that maybe humans were created to excavate gold. These are all connections that we've been making that we find kind of interesting, and that kind of flies in the face of Carl Jung's theory that all of this is just some archetype of us being afraid of snakes. If this is all us being afraid of snakes, then why gold? Why the ability to fly, regardless of whether you have wings or not, or why the ability of telepathy, of being super intelligent, or even the fact that a lot of mythologies talk about the dragon coming from other worlds, meaning not of this place, not Earth, essentially. Anyways, let's keep going. And then another guest was Elijah Schaefer, and he starts talking about the nature of mushrooms. And it's kind of interesting because here, let's listen to what he's got to say.
But the reality speaking is when you talk about people's trips on hallucinogens, why do they all see the same things? Why is this not an uncommon experience where people see dark forces, the devil? I mean, but coming into this with aliens, it's like,
We're all human.
Well, it depends. It's not all unison. It's not all the same.
but
some people have positive effects. Some people have negative effects.
I had positive effects. Yeah.
So Luke kind of plays, that's Luke Rukowski. He kind of plays the part of the skeptic. Luke has been on Tim Pool's show for like, I don't know, last 6 or 7 episodes. I don't know if he's kind of become part of the new show. But I really like what Elijah Schaefer was saying, because he's talking about like the nature of hallucinogenic trips and how oftentimes when you take hallucinogens, you actually see the same thing. A long time ago, me and my friend, it was one of the few times I ever took mushrooms in my life. But, we had a very intense, very spiritual experience. And at a certain point, it was like his entire being kind of broke into pieces, and I could see like my entire being break into pieces, almost like a cloud. And when the cloud mixes, I swear I could see a lot of his thoughts. And not just that, and so we did some like telepathy tests, and we were getting like numbers straight up, like being able to predict each other's numbers. Like I called out the number 167, which ended up being the exact number that he was thinking of, and he didn't even tell me it was a 3-digit number. But one of the coolest things that we did was that I looked at him and I said, dude, I can see your aura. And I'm not a guy who sees auras, traditionally. It just, on that trip, I could see this energy field going around him. And he's like, no way. I can see my own aura. I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. I was like, okay, let's do a test. You go to your room. I go to my room. Let's write down what we think the aura looks like. So we both wrote down on a piece of paper. We came back. We compared notes. And I had literally written green and gold. And he wrote light green and amber, using those exact words. So that was like, okay, we are probably seeing the same thing. I don't know what this is, but it's definitely feeling like a form of objective reality. And something else about this that's really interesting is Dr. Emack, the Harvard, well, here Tempo's talking about Harvard scientist, but the Harvard psychologist who studied alien abductions. And one of the things that he discovered about alien abductions is that he was having a really hard time determining or differentiating the concept of what people see when they do hallucinogens and what people experience when they're having alien abductions, almost as if the experience itself is a merger. Now, he wasn't necessarily saying that the alien abductions was a false claim. He just was trying to wrap in his head why this is happening. And look, all I have to say about this is that the science of consciousness, it's one of the least known aspects of all of our sciences. We don't know what a thought is. Generally you're not able to create energy out of nothing. That's one of the thermodynamic rules, but a thought is a form of energy. It's a form of creation that we're able to create. So I don't think we have a lot of good science as to how a thought comes about. We know how the neurons transfer through our brains. We can deduce all these smaller things, but the actual concept of creating knowledge is something that is poorly understood still. So I think that the whole idea of mushroom trips, it's kind of merging that concept of conscious science, if I can use those terms, and what happens to aliens and how aliens are able to abduct people. I think they use a form of quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics doesn't differentiate when you can flow through a wall. It doesn't matter how big you are. You will behave like a particle, like a quantum particle, if you're thermodynamically separated from your environment. So if you're able to somehow create a pocket or a bubble that is beyond space-time continuum, you can essentially behave like a quantum particle. And I think all of this, the abductions, the science related to consciousness, maybe there is a link that we just have yet to discover. And maybe it is that people are talking to intelligences that could be comparable to the same intelligences that are visiting us through UAPs or UFOs, however you want to term it. So I really like what Elijah Schaefer says here. Check this
where I
out.
began to become aware that God was real, he was in my life, and I've never been the same. And so sometimes I wonder, the people that doubt that there's something else out there, maybe it's just they haven't experienced anything real, or they've been around so many frauds who are trying to, sell something to them, or they're just basing off of a hallucination that's why they don't believe. I think there's like a split in that.
Now, I think it's awesome that he was able to find a form of greater, God, I guess you can call it, like a greater sense of living other than just the deductionist approach and, the nihilistic way of thinking of like, oh, we're just whatever. But I just want to play Temple's answer to kind of finish off this episode, because I'll be honest, it did bother me a little bit.
Met people who have told me that they've communicated with other beings or something like that. Like I had one guy who told me that he was a drug addict, he was wasting his life, and then one day he was in the woods and he felt a voice inside of him coming out asking him, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And that was a profound spiritual experience where he became very, very Christian, and then turned his life around, got off drugs, started working. And he was just like some punk rock dude. He kept to, his love of punk rock, but he opened a business and he just totally got away from drugs. And he was like, I know you won't believe me when I say that it happened, but it doesn't matter. It happened to me. It's my experience. I can tell you what I experienced, and it's your choice if you want to believe it or not. And he was like, and I understand most people who hear that are going to say, that's crazy. There's no way that happened. And he's like, but I'm telling you, a voice came from the center of my being telling me this. And I was like, I believe you, but there's two ways to explain it. You had a spiritual response because an otherworldly being was telling you you're destroying your life, or you took too many drugs. Either way, it helped you, so it's a positive thing. I think, just kind of roll with it. And I'm not going to come out and rain on your parade and be like, no, you're wrong, you're crazy. I'm going to be like, hey, man, you're doing really well for yourself. You've turned things around. Whatever it was, it worked and it helped you.
Yeah. So he says it in a very politically correct way, but it's very, very patronizing. Because I think Elijah Schaefer was trying to really kind of make this delicate point that I know this sounds crazy. I know people think that it's always this kind of a religious thing, but I swear there's an objective reality that really affected my life in a way that it's almost unexplainable. And then Temple was like, well, whatever helps you. It's like, oh, dude, come on, man. If it seems like, I'm not trying to rag on Temple. The reason why I even talk about this is, these are all subjects that we've been talking about for a long time. And Temple, he'll say like, oh, I'm being shadow banned, but the truth is Temple gets like 30 to 40% of his views are the amount of subscribers that he has. He has a very good ratio of views per subscribers, something close to like 30 or 40%. Our channel gets somewhere between 2 to 3%, and that is with way less subscribers. So whenever he does venture into the topic of UFOs, if he ends up kind of missing certain things, at least, and I mean, these are opinions. I don't want to say that he's wrong or that I'm more right than he is. It's just that we've been talking about so much of this for so long that I think there's a lot that we can contribute. Luke Rukowski, I really like him as well. I think he's awesome. I think it's great that he's teaming up with Tim Pool. I think Luke knows about Second Earth channel. Well, first he's friends with Josh Sigurdson, who I think he's basically been kicked out of YouTube. But Josh used to comment on our channel all the time. But there's actually a more personal reason why I'm almost certain that Luke knows about my channel. And it has to do, well, it's personal. Maybe some of you will get what I'm saying. Maybe I don't really want to get too deep in it. I'll just leave it at that, kind of a mystery, I guess. If those guys really want somebody who has been dealing with the UFO topics to talk about this in their show, I'm game, man. I'm open for it. So, if anybody happens to know them or has their contact and wants to let them know that, hey, there's this channel that would actually like to fill in a little bit on this topic, by all means, man, you have my permission to put my name out there. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me once again. This is Felipe speaking, signing out.